Are you looking for quality APA continuing education courses on culture and diversity? Well, we got you covered. We're excited for you to explore our courses that we're offering a 50% discount for our listeners. Use the code FRIENDS50, that's all caps, at the checkout when you register for your courses. Visit us at www.tmcinstitute.org to explore our live and on-demand psychology CE courses. Now onward to today's episode. We are seeing it play out, where topics and statements about race and diversity are being removed. We're seeing training programs no longer having to uphold standards to address race and culture. How do we as mental health educators and therapists train future students? Frankly, how is this impacting students in the classroom? And do we need to take a step back to examine how we are engaging students? How are counselors and educators thinking differently about how to empower students so that conversations on topics of race and culture can be discussed? Welcome to People of Color in Psychology, the show that explores mental health topics specific to culture, diversity, and communities of color. I am your host, Jack Sun. Our guest today is the esteemed Dr. Claire Martin, an assistant professor of counseling. She holds a PhD in counselor education and supervision and a master's in clinical mental health counseling from University of Missouri, St. Louis, as well as a master's in psychology from SUNY Hunter College. Dr. Martin's work focuses on multiculturalism, trauma-informed practices, and the impact of oppression and discrimination on marginalized populations. Dr. Martin is a research associate with the Center for Communally Funded Research and serves in leadership roles with the Association for Multicultural Counseling and Development and the Association for Specialists in Group Work. She is recognized in her field for advancing social justice efforts through her advocacy work, clinical experience, and research. As a licensed professional counselor in Missouri, Dr. Martin specializes in complex trauma using EMDR and trauma-focused CBT in her practice. She also provides trauma-informed clinical supervision to counselors in training. Before her career in academia and the mental health field, she worked as a program evaluator for Children's Services in New York City, focusing on services for immigrant and refugee families. As a Black, Haitian diaspora, and Afro-Caribbean American therapist, Dr. Martin will be discussing the fears and discomfort that are showing up in the classroom given today's socio-political conflict and how we as therapists and educators can create a safe learning environment. Dr. Martin, thank you so much for being on our podcast today and speaking with me and our listeners about such an important topic.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sen, for having me. It's a pleasure.
This is particularly important, and you're actually very brave and courageous to be on our show because many people are wondering about the impact of the socio-political climate today. And you are taking a stand by speaking up and seeing visibly or what is happening in the classroom setting. So I want to acknowledge that courage and bravery by you being on our podcast today.
Thank you so much.
So, Dr. Martin, can you share with us some of the existing work that you're involved with right now?
Okay, so as an educator, so I teach counselor trainees. As a professor, I'm also involved in research, and my research is around racial trauma. It's around the experiences of marginalized communities and how trauma-informed practice is kind of needed in the field. So I'm, besides being a counselor educator where I'm teaching, I'm also involved in research, specifically focusing on the experiences of marginalized communities, seeing like how the lack of trauma-informed practices can have an impact on their experiences, and also a way to kind of like educating others who may not know like how some practices may impact people, especially those with marginalized communities.
Yeah. So that is, the the research as well as the clinical work that you're doing and teaching work, sharing these type of practices. And you're, training a lot of counselors in training, and you're beginning to notice that some of the students are actually exhibiting some discomfort and fears, not about the content, but about just the space that, hey, I'm here to learn about therapies and I have this other stuff going on in my environment. Can you share with me what you've have observed, what you've noticed?
Mhm. I would say that because of so many changes happening in terms of policies that are impacting many marginalized communities.
Can you give me an
Um,
example of the policies?
yeah, so for example, there might be like funding, or there might be like cuts to funding that may be impacting clients, that may be impacting communities of color. And as a result of that, that has a direct impact on not only the students in the classroom who are counselor trainees, but also the clients that those students are seeing, because many, especially when they are like in clinic doing clinical work, so they are seeing clients who may be like coming from marginalized backgrounds, and those policies also impact those clients. So we have students who are directly impacted, and also who are seeing clients who are also directly impacted by those policies.
So when you say lack of funding, it's like they may not have, say, practicum slots or something, or they may not get paid for their internships. And then, of course, when you don't have therapists available or trainees or practicum slots available, then that means clients won't have a therapist that they really connect with to be able to work with them.
Yes, so lack of fundings can include like cuts to mental health services being provided in certain communities. And as a result of that, is this limited services being provided in areas that were already at a deficit because of either there's lack of mental health professionals, lack of access to mental health services. So now with the decrease in funding, that may impact how those communities were supported to access mental health services. So now that's having a direct impact on counselor trainees who are seeing clients who may not be able to come for services anymore.
Gosh, yeah. I think we don't really make this type of connection when we're thinking about training, how practicum slots or practicum placements sometimes are embedded within communities that are seeking and needing services. Yeah. And so you're noticing, that this lack of funding in terms of policy. What about the students? What are you noticing?
It's an overall sense of exhaustion because students are not only having to deal with like wearing multiple hats. Like they're not only students, they also have their own families, their own personal lives that they have to attend to, and things are impacting them as well. So they have to attend to that. Then they still have to be present in the classroom and learning, and that requires some level of mental energy, and to have to navigate not only like personal stuff, but also things that impacts not only themselves but also their clients, things that they may not feel like they have control over, things that they may not have answers to. And I think this is the state that we're living in currently. It's like there are many questions that we have and we don't have answers to. And that kind of lack of certainty can be triggering. It can trigger like previous traumatic experiences that people have had, because it can bring like this sense of anxiety of not knowing what the future holds, not knowing what's happening for my clients. So this overall sense of not knowing, lack of stability, and also not knowing what to do to help.
Yeah. There is a sense of heaviness and hopelessness. And I think, with your work with immigrant and refugee families, and when you're also talking about marginalized or students with marginalized identities, I can't help but also think, or I can't help and also think how the immigration experience and being a refugee, there's so much uncertainty. And so for students to experience that, and of course, I would imagine it's still difficult to learn just in the school setting. Hey, I'm thinking about survival. I'm thinking about all these other things.
Exactly. So we have students who have those marginalized identities, like who may be like immigrants themselves. So things are impacting them, but also things are impacting their families. Even when they are in situations where things are not impacting them directly, their families might be impacted or their home country might be impacted. And as a result of that is there's the focus on what can I do to help the people back home. And they may ended up feeling like helpless and not being able to remain focused on the task. And we also have students who, although they may not be directly impacted, they may be working with clients who have those marginalized background, who are immigrants and refugees. And those students may not know like how to best show up for those clients who may have like so many uncertainties, or clients who, as a result of what's happening, may start to develop like some sort of distrust towards their counselors because they may not trust if the counselor will turn them in or not.
Oh, wow. Wow. That trust, it's like I'm working with the client and having to navigate, wait, does this client even trust me? Because they're concerned I might turn them in. This is stuff that I don't remember having been taught in graduate school. So really a lot of these counselors in training are getting a very advanced real world, I don't know even how to put it, like interaction in terms of how to deal with socio-political issues. And oftentimes, the diagnoses, DSM, there's a tendency to be very individualistic. This is the client. This is why they're depressed. It's almost as though the responsibility is on a client. And rather than looking at from a socio or ecological perspective, there's so much stuff that's happening to the students, to the clients. So, I mean, this must be tough for you. I mean, you're working with the students, you're seeing this unfold, you're trying to provide them the tools to help the clients that they're serving.
It's challenging. And that's one of the reasons why, as educators, you need to be very intentional about how you show up for students and how you create an environment where that is supportive of students to be able to bring up those things and talk about it in class. Because if you don't create that environment, what happens is the student is left thinking that they're the only one who are experiencing that kind of uncertainty, and they may not bring it up. So as educators, we need to be intentional about creating that space. And to be able to be intentional, you have to have an understanding of what is happening to our students, but also to the clients that they're seeing. So taking on all these different perspectives and creating that classroom environment so that to facilitate that kind of conversation in the classroom.
This is going beyond just I don't know, like a cognitive cerebral exercise. Like you're learning a treatment. No, you're actually, is it safe for me to say that you're taking a pause from, hey, here's some of the academic content, and how do we also create this space where people can share and make that connection of what they are experiencing to the academic content?
Yes, and I would not separate it out. It's merging them because the academic content needs to be relatable, right? So it's not separated. It's like, how do you adapt the academic content to current issues? So you merge them. It's like a marriage between what the theory is saying and this is the current situation. And you merge that. And so educators need to be intentional about doing that merge and not separating out what's happening currently to academic work.
Thanks for clarifying that, because it is so important. We do have a tendency to separate it out. Yeah. And I think the other piece, I don't know, I had a thought there when you were sharing about this experience. So can you maybe, for our listeners, maybe outline or list or just describe how you go about creating that dialogue or safe learning environment? How have you done so?
First, I need to understand my own biases, I would say my own understanding of the social political climate, my own lens, in other words. Like I need to understand like my own lens, my own barriers. And my own identities also, because that's part of the, as an educator, that's part of the element also. So that's one thing. Then second is examining, like, okay, what are the students' needs? How do I know that? I would know that if I make the time to actually check in with them, like building that connection. So that rapport, that focus on building rapport, starts from day one. And one of the ways that I do that is by not only getting to know the students, but also getting them to be invested in the work that we're doing together as a class. So they know that in this class, this is their class. They need to take ownership of the learning that's happening here. So I need to hear their voices. I need to hear what's happening with them, because that's creating the knowledge and where we go next. So as a result of that rapport building that's happening at the beginning of class, it's getting the students buy-in. And as we continue to go further, like in the class, and I see like connections being built between the students as a group, as a cohesive group, where they start caring for each other. They start caring for each other's experiences, right? So it gets to a point where even if I don't ask, I will see them engaging with each other and asking the other person, like, how you doing? Or rooting for each other, right? Becoming like I said, like a very cohesive group, very supportive of each other. And I think that's essential, like to have that kind of space where people feel like I'm heard, I'm not the only one. And I have a space where I can put down my barriers and talk and not be judged by what I'm saying, or having like that supportive environment. The other thing I would say is, as educators, we need to be aware of what is happening in the community, in the communities that impact our clients, not only our clients, but our students, our students' clients. We need to stay informed, because if we're not informed, then we will not know what to bring to the classroom, how to open up those conversations. So we need to be willing to broach those conversations, but we need to have that information. So if you're not informed, you're not gonna know you're not gonna know how to address it, or even what to address. I would say also, as educators, to create like even your own community where you process that kind of information, because you might be overwhelmed, like having a classroom where there's so much happening. And if you don't have a space where you debrief, you also get that support system, that affirming space, you're gonna feel drained. You're gonna feel like you're on your own. So you need to create that space for yourself as well.
Wow. This is truly incredible. And I say this because you are giving students control to help shape the knowledge in which they are acquiring. You're facilitating that process. The other part that I hear from this method, or just from your experience and having done this, is recognizing that right now is also a time where we also have to focus on the educators or therapists to create a supportive group. Previously it might just be, I have a coworker, colleague that I talk with, but now it seems there is the intentionality that you've mentioned that needs to be more evident, where, hey, after teaching a class, or even working with certain marginalized groups, having like a whole week where I've worked with clients who have experienced, say, some of the trauma that's happening right now, I need to check in with a group of folks who are also in this together.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Creating that space, but also like even finding additional like ways to replenish yourself. One of the things that I do when I check in with my students is like I ask for how they take care of themselves, and I give them like 8 domains of how they take care of themselves, whether it's like physical wellness, financial wellness, spiritual wellness. So I give them all these domains, and I ask them, which one were you focusing on this week? So for ourselves as educators and therapists, we need to also continuously assessing how am I taking care of these domains? So yes, I have this group of other professionals that I can connect with and getting the developmental support, but also how do I take care of my physical wellness? How do I take care of my emotional wellness and financial wellness and so forth? So creating like those spaces and being intentional about it is key.
Yeah. Now, is there anything else you'd like to add in terms of, this segment, which is discussing the fears and discomfort that are showing up in the classroom amongst our students? Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yes, I would say besides like being committed to a trauma-informed practice, taking like an ecological perspective, like you were mentioning earlier, being self-aware, developing that cultural humility, meaning like coming from a place of you don't know it all, right? And you have to be humble about the fact that you don't know it all, and therefore you're going to ask, and how you're going to ask it. So being in the classroom, it's like you might ended up having students who might be the one telling you this is what's happening, right? So, or they might tell you about their own personal experiences with their clients or their clients' experiences. And as an educator, you may not know it all. So having that cultural humility to kind of use that information to enrich the classroom. The other thing I would mention is being authentic and very transparent.
Mm. As you are continuously investing in this work, being authentic to your students as well as the field, as I mentioned, this is heavy work, especially right now. How can you share with us any memorable events and circumstances that influenced how you got into this work?
Mm. Well, I identify as an immigrant, first generation, someone with multiple marginalized identities. So from a firsthand experience, I know the importance of having a safe space, whether it's physical and emotional safe space. And I've experienced that in undergrad, where I've had a particular mentor, a professor who was very intentional about creating that physical and emotional space where I felt seen and I felt heard. So that was my first experience. And I think as a result of that, I think that shaped how I wanted to be there, show up for others, how I wanted to be there for others in this field.
Mm, mm. And and how did you decide that this was the field that you would land on?
I developed a passion for what shaped people. And then I started examining like various ways to have that influence, whether it's to work with the person individually, whether it's to work with the system, whether it's to work with the people providing services. So yeah.
And this method, or I guess through these interactions, it isn't just individual. It gives you the opportunity to work with groups like, classrooms through education. You're touching on multiple facets of a person's development and shaping.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
also research. Research is also another way to influence the field and also disseminate information to a broader audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, as a person of color, what were some challenges that you faced and overcame that you would be willing to share?
Mhm. Personal challenges. I've experienced racial trauma, and I think it's something that I had to be very intentional about. How do I preserve myself, and what do I make out of that? How do I use that to propel me to make changes so that others don't have to experience that?
Wow. Wow. Because I'm having a reaction when you share that statement. I experienced racial trauma because I think about such a harmful environment that strips away who you are as a person by
Yes.
engaging in the hurtful, violent interaction. And for you to flip that around and then think and consider there are many others in the community or my community or folks who are marginalized who are also experiencing the same thing. How can I overcome this? So there's a bit of, not a bit, but the motivation to be able to connect with folks is a way in which you are, I wouldn't say overcome, but in which you are wrestling or challenging, fighting back against racial trauma.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't know if there's, yeah, I'm kind of careful about not saying overcome. Yeah, I don't know what's the correct word to say right now, but it's not overcoming it. It's like constantly fighting it.
Yeah. It's a constant battle.
Constant battle, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for you, what does it mean to be a Black, Haitian, diaspora, and Afro-Caribbean American therapist?
It means that there's a lot more of me needed, individuals with my background needed. Like I currently, I am in the Midwest and there are not enough Haitian therapists. There's a high need for mental health providers with multiple marginalized identities who can understand and be empathetic to the experiences of others. I'm also fortunate to be in a position where I can make my voice heard to represent communities that may not be able to have their voices heard, and using that as the platform to speak up for others, to advocate for others, advocate for changes, and bring in all these lenses. Like you said, being Haitian, first generation immigrant, identifying as Black, female, someone who has moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, like even having all these experiences, someone who spent more than half of my life like in higher ed, like being from undergrad to several several institutions. Like, so how can I be there? So my question to me is like, how can I use the body that I'm in, the identities I'm carrying with me, and be a source of change or source of influence for others, positive influence for others.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And Dr. Martin, how can we support you?
I think for people to develop that curiosity of, let me hear about what this is about. If it's something that that was not part of their field or their experiences, start with that curiosity, and start with also with that cultural humility, saying to themselves, like, I may not know what I'm about to listen to, but let me just be curious about it. Yeah, I think that's the first thing, because very often I find that when people are fearful of others or a subject, is because of the unknown. But if they allow themselves to be curious, then suddenly it's like, oh, I can relate to this in some ways. Then you start seeing like changes in how they even perceive it. Yeah. And I would say also, for ways to support me would be to asking yourself, like, how can I be an ally? Doing the work, like asking yourself, like, how can I support others? How can I show up for others? How can I create safe environments for students in academic settings? How can I create safe spaces for my students with marginalized backgrounds or clients with marginalized backgrounds? So yeah.
Yeah. That's it definitely, it shows a sense of solidarity in doing this work, that you're not just the one doing this work. It'd be nice for others to also be doing this work. It'll make your work easier. There's also the community piece. I'm engaging and connecting with others doing this work. And we know this from the data in terms of workforce, demographics for counselor educators, social workers, psychologists. The field consistently and is still mostly white. And so we do want to be able to recognize that, we do need more diversity. We do need more people who are more connected with the communities that we're trying to help support. Well, Dr. Martin, thank you so much for being on our episode today and having this wonderful conversation. Any final thoughts?
No, it's been a pleasure to speak with you about this. It's bringing up a lot of emotions for me actually talking about it. But thank you for creating the space and for being courageous and supportive and being an ally.
You bet. Because I think a lot of us are wondering, how are the students responding? Not just that, how do we respond to the students? Because many of us are either in, private practice, we're working directly with clients. However, we also think about the continuation of our field. In order for it to progress, we need to invest in the students. And then yet, for us somewhat removed or who are not working in academic institutions, we don't see what's happening directly. And then for you to share what you're observing on the ground and noticing, that is important for us to have that lens.
Well, thank you.
All right, Dr. Martin, thank you so much for your time today. A huge thank you to our listeners. If you enjoyed this episode, please share and subscribe to People of Color in Psychology. You can also support us by registering for continuing education courses or making a one-time donation on the Multicultural Counseling Institute's website. Your feedback is important to us, so feel free to send an email, a message on LinkedIn, or leave a voice message on our website. Until next time, this is your host, Jack Sun.